Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome back to the lightning round, tutorial video number 1.5. Since I'm recording this on Christmas, so all of you watching this a little bit past Christmas, Merry Christmas to you all. We just released another animation on Squared Media, so go watch that. But I just wanted to leave you guys with a little bit more learning before the holidays wrap up. I've got a big move coming up. I'm going to be driving over 1,000 miles starting tomorrow, so I don't really have any other time to record this video, but I wanted to stick true to my promises, have this video come out on the 28th, and give you guys a little bit more to chew on. So instead of just covering all the lighting stuff in the next video, the big 2.0 video, I'm going to briefly go over a little bit of lighting stuff in this one just so you guys can make some renders. I'm going to cover a little bit about the camera that I didn't in the first episode, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about Mineways, which is something that for all of you who are in the Discord, there was a lot of questions about Mineways. So I'm going to go ahead and teach on that a little bit and show a little bit of the differences between that and JMC and maybe what's a better use case for which one. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So as for Mineways, the way that world exporters work, there's two main ones. There's JMC and there's Mineways. And the one that I taught on last video was JMC. And that one, if I go into edit mode by hitting tab here, let me also turn on my screencast keys for you guys to follow along with. You'll notice that these faces here are grouped up and pretty big where they can be. So JMC tries to optimize your scene as much as possible, versus Mineways is going to break up all of these little blocks here into individual blocks. Now that might be nicer for editing worlds on a smaller scale, because you don't have to go and do loop cuts on any of these things. Like I was showing you last video where you have to go in and control R and scroll up. You don't have to do that with Mineways because every single block is its own block, but it's also less optimized on a larger scale. But if you're working with a really small world like this one, then maybe using Mineways is better for you. So in that case, I'm going to show you guys how to get Mineways. You're just going to go to realtimerendering.com. You're going to click on download whatever the latest one is here. You're going to go into your files, and you want to unzip the zip folder that it gives you. Go into Mineways, click here, and what you want is the one that just says Mineways, capital M, none of this other stuff. You're going to double click on this here, and the nice thing about this is that you don't have to go hunting for your files. It should just, when you go to File, Open World, this should just be all of your Minecraft worlds. If it doesn't load, then you can go to Find Your World and you can go into your .minecraft saves and try to locate that, or you can go anywhere else on your computer if you've downloaded a map from somewhere. But in this case, we can just go to Open World, we can click on Tutorial, and it already loads it up for us. So similar to JMC, we can just click and drag to move the map around. We can right click and drag to select the area that we want to export. And in this case, it's very similar to JMC. We're just going to hit File, then we're going to go to Export for Rendering. Find a folder or create a folder for Mineways exports and just save this as, tutorial world export. I'm just going to call it Mineways, Minecraft, Mineways, just so we know that this is the Mineways one. And again, this is entirely optional. This is more so just because I saw a lot of you guys asking how to use Mineways on the Discord. Very, very simple. It's going to ask you, or it's going to give you some stats here. You just say yes. Close out of that. Your OBJ should be already ready to go. And we're going to do just like we did in video 1. We go to File, Import, Wavefront OBJ. We're going to find our Mineways exports folder, and we're just going to yoink that OBJ right there. Alright, so as you can see, it's pretty much the same world. Actually about the same size too. This one's a little bit bigger, but I want to show you guys some stats here in a second, just to show you guys what I was talking about it being less optimized. The first thing that we always want to do as well is make sure that we go into MC Prep. Instead of JMC to OBJ, we want to click Mineways, and we want to prep the materials. As you can see, the materials changed just a little bit, and now we've got them properly set up for Blender. But there's a really cool function here where if you click on the double circles here, the overlays button, and you click on the drop down here and you click on statistics, whatever you have selected in your scene, you can now see how dense it is with polygons. So in this case, my JMC world right here, if I select both the trees and the world, you'll see that it's got about 1.6 million triangles. In this case, the world was a little bit smaller. Trees usually make up most of the density for polygons. So this one's still a little bit less expensive than the JMC world, but it's also a little bit smaller. But if I zoom in here and I hit tab, you'll notice that every single block is its own face. And like I said before, this may be easier for editing for you when you're trying to build your world or destroy a couple blocks. And if you're working with really small scenes, I actually advise using Mineways because it's just easier to work with, just plain and simple. But when you're trying to do these big, large-scale scenes and you want to save on every single resource that you can, go JMC because you'll get a lot less faces and that'll reduce your render times a lot. So that's the essentials of Mineways. Both Mineways and JMC are good. So now I want to focus a little bit on rendering. And in order to render, we kind of need two components. We need a camera, and two, we need to light our scene. So in order to render, if you want to get a preview of your render, you just hit F12. And this will start rendering out your scene. As you can see, my camera feed's starting to lag because it's taking all my GPU power to render this out. There's a couple things wrong with this render right away. As you can see, it's taking forever to render 4,000. We don't want that at 4,000 samples. That's taking way too long. So we're going to X out of that. You can see me again in full HD. I'm back. But what we want to do is not kill our computer every single time that we hit the render button. So what we want to do is go to our render properties tab. And in here, you want to find where it says sampling. And sampling is basically how high of a definition is your computer going to render out your scene in. And past a certain point, this number doesn't really matter because of a little option that we have called denoising. So back when I first started about 8 years ago, having really high render samples, like 200, 300, 400, was very important because you get these little white objects that would just or little white specks all around your render, and it would look really grainy, and it just didn't look good. So you'd want a lot of samples, and we didn't have this fancy denoise option. But now, if you just click this, it basically, as I coined the phrase, takes a wet finger and smudges all the noise everywhere. So basically what that's doing is if you have a very grainy image, what denoise does is it kind of approximates what should be where and smoothens out your image so you don't have that loss of detail. So because we have this denoise setting, we can turn our render samples down to probably 50. I don't think we need anything more than that. We'll turn our viewport samples down to that as well, and we'll just check denoise for both of them. As far as our color management, I have AGX as my default. I work in sRGB. This is something that we're going to talk about more in the 2.0 tutorial, but for now, just go into your color management. If it's on standard, change it to AGX. I'll go through, I think Michael uses Chronos PBR. I know a couple of the directors have used Filmic and a couple other like ACEs in the past, so I'll talk more about that when I go into the full explanation of color spaces and all that in the future in this tutorial series. But for right now, just follow along with that. We're going to work with AGX. And now that we have our sample set to 50, we're going to hit F12 again. And now it's done. We've got our render. That was a whole lot less laggy than last time. Our render finished a lot faster. As you can see, it rendered in about 8 seconds. But now we have the problem of our scene being way too dark. And there's a couple of very quick things that we can do to enhance this and give ourselves a nice looking render. So now what we want to do, the first glaring issue in our render is that our background is completely gray. We want a nice pretty sky. So the first thing that we can do to add a sky is we can go into the world properties, which is the home of where the background lives. So if I go into my material settings up here and I enable scene world, I'm able to see what my background looks like. Just as a quick preview. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but this is a great preview for if you're just trying to see like a basic idea of what's going on in the background. And what we want to do here is we want to click on this yellow dot by color. And that's going to give us a bunch of options. And what we're looking for is to texture this background. Now there's a few different textures that you can pick here, like say I can pick a magic texture and there's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens, or sky texture, it kind of gets washed out unless you change the settings a little bit. I think in this case the has something to do with the air density, so I can like mess around with this. I can lower the ozone, I can lower the strength. You know, that's starting to look actually kind of nice. Sky texture is something that we've played around with a little bit if you're going to add some custom clouds in, but typically the easiest route that I found to get some nice lighting right away is go to click on the color dot, go to environment texture. It's going to turn really pink for a second. That's just because it wants an image texture, and we haven't put one in yet, so it just defaults to pink. And we're going to open, and what we want here is an image called an HDRI, or a high dynamic range image. And that just has a really wide scope of colors. It just gives a great baseline for lighting in our scenes. And I have a bunch of them in a folder called Skies That Don't Suck. We've been using this folder for about 8 years at Squared Media. Back when we were called Black Plasma Studios, we still were using these same skies. So if you guys want access to some of these HDRIs to use in your background, join the Discord, link in the description. They'll be in the shared assets folder once this video goes live. So I'm just gonna pick, maybe we want this to be in the evening. So I'm just gonna double click on an evening sky. That one's a little bit too cloudy. Maybe I'll go with something a little bit warmer or a little bit brighter. Maybe we want a morning 12 high. That one's also a little bit dark. Oh, it's because I have the strength turned really down. Okay. Another thing you can do with your HDRIs is you can mess with the strength. Sometimes you can have them for ones that are a little bit more mild like this. You can absolutely turn up the strength to just throw more light in your scene. The other thing too, when you're previewing how bright your scene's going to be, I would also check this scene lights checkbox there, and that'll give you a rough idea of how bright your scene is going to be getting. Let's see. We also have one nighttime one, but I'm just going to play around a little bit. Like this one looks great, I think. This gives me a little bit more warmer tones. This feels a little bit better for my desert. There's not a ton going on, but I get some nice clouds. I get some nice variation in the background. So I think we're going to stick with this one, Cloudy 17 high. And for the purpose of this tutorial, I'll stick this exact one in the in the Discord, so you guys will be able to use this in your own scene, as well as with a few other skies that I'll go through and pick out which I think are the best. And now if we hit F12, so you can see, we can actually see our character now. There's still some stuff that we need to do with lighting, but at least this is starting to look like a scene now. And as we're going through, and one thing I forgot to mention before, as we're going through and testing our different renders, another thing we want to do is we want to change the slot. So what these slots are basically freezing a render to a slot, and if we make a change and we move it to say slot 2, then we can go back and look at slot 1 and we can see what changed in the image. So for instance, if I go to slot 2 before I close out, and then I want to make a change to his animation here, add a little keyframe, and I want to remove this torch in the background. Delete faces. And then I want to Shift A and add a point light. I'll put that right in front of him here. So then if I hit F12 again, now we have this rendered frame, and we can go back to slot 1 and we can see exactly what changed. So this is how you're going to iterate on your scenes as you're changing lighting and you're changing different properties, and you can see how you develop. And oftentimes whenever people are doing those render compilations of how I built out this scene, what you're often seeing is them rendering to different slots and then just like cutting to each one, showing you the progression of their compositing and their lighting and everything else. So as you can see here, we're already starting to look a lot better. We've got a little bit more light on the front of the character. But in this case specifically, there's a couple more things I want to teach you guys that are just quick and dirty, really easy tricks to make your renders look a whole lot nicer. And then I'm just going to go ahead and end this video, and we're going to spend a lot more time in the full 2.0 tutorial, or the full sequel of the first video, going into more depth about this, going into more depth with the compositor and different lighting setups and some good practices with that. So I also noticed that I missed a little face from my torch head back there, so I'm just going to take care of issues as I see them. So we're going to just hit X, delete faces on that. And the main thing I'm missing in this scene is a sun lamp. So I'm going to Shift A, and then we're going to make a sun lamp, and I can use my rotation tools to change where that's casting shadows. In this case, the light kind of looks like it's coming from off to the right, so I'm going to have the sun maybe cast this way, get a nice shadow behind my character, and maybe even move the camera so I can see my character's shadow and get a little bit of a wider shot. Oh, another cool thing about the camera, if you guys are distracted by all this empty space in the background, there's a really neat setting that you can go down here, and it is in the viewport display, and it's called Passe Part Out, or hold on, I'm going to actually just go here and say, how do you pronounce Passepartout? And we're going to learn this together. Passepartout. All right, so we're going to turn our Passepartout up to 1.0, and then you're not going to be able to see anything on the sides. So now you get a clear view of what exactly is in your frame. You can frame that a lot better now. Maybe I want a shot that looks more like, there's more like that. I don't know, just kind of messing around with it. But I'm not distracted by anything outside of my camera now. I asked the director team what they have this on last week. Some of them said like 0.995 or 0.997, just so they have a little bit. Others work in 1.0. I just work with the whole thing completely blacked out. That's what works for me. So I'm going to keep this at 1.0. And also, the other thing too that's worth noting is that if you have objects really far in your background, your camera might be clipping them out. So you want to make sure that your lens clip distance is set to like 100,000 or a million, which is different from when you press N and you go to view and this clip distance. These are two different things. So when you're in the camera view, it has its own clip distance, which is going to be found right here. And when you're in the viewport, that's a different one. We talked about the viewport clip distance in the first episode, so just know that the camera one is different than what's in the viewport. So now that we have a sun lamp in our scene, I'm going to turn it up a little bit, maybe give it a strength of, we'll say 3, make it a little bit brighter, a little bit stronger. I like to have my suns usually around like 2 to 5 in terms of their strength. And another thing that we can do is we can actually make it softer by changing the angle. All right, for the sake of not complicating this video too much, I'm just going to jump into compositing really quickly. I'm going to do one more render. I'm going to hit F12 one more time on this, and we're going to jump into the compositor. I'm going to show you guys a couple of very quick and easy nodes, and then I will leave you guys with that until the new year. And just very, very quickly, as I'm editing this video together, I realized that every time I made a change to the compositor, my audio would glitch out pretty bad. So now that I know the issue that's going on with my microphone, I'll work on fixing that for the tutorial 2.0. But yeah, just bear with me, guys. Just look at the screen, look what I'm doing. Everything's pretty self-explanatory, and I'll have that fixed for the next video. Thanks. So going into our compositor, we want to go to the Compositing tab. And we're going to hit New. And these two nodes are very important. One, this group output is basically influencing what we're doing applied to the final render. And this one right here, this viewer node, is what we're doing basically previewed on what we see in the background here. So this render here. And there's a lot of stuff I can teach on with render layers and lots of fancy things there. We're just going to keep this super simple since the compositor is very overwhelming, especially when you're first starting out. But I'll teach you guys a couple of very foundational concepts very quickly and show you guys how to make your renders look a lot better with very minimal effort. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to add what's called a vignette, or basically darkening of the edges of the frame. Because right now, the entire frame is very bright, and we want our audience to focus a little bit more on the subject matter, which is typically in the middle of the frame. And there's a very clever way we can go about that. So if we hit Shift-A, similar to what we do in the viewport, and we hit Search, we're going to look for what's called an ellipse mask. So we're going to find that ellipse mask, and if we ever want to preview what something's doing, we can hold down Control, Shift, and click on it. And now we can see that it moves the viewer node over to the ellipse mask, and we can see what this ellipse mask is doing. The way that I understand how color works in the compositor and how you layer things on top of one another is that white is 1 and black is 0. If any of you have used a painting software before where you're working with masks, basically white is where the mask is applied and black is where it's not applied. So, and if that goes over your head right now, that's okay. I'm going to go into more depth in that in the future videos. But for now, just understand that white is where we're applying the effect and black is where we're not. So in this case, we want to have edge darkening, and we want to have it just on the corners of our screen. So right now, if we were to multiply this ellipse mask by the actual image, you'll see that all we can see right now is just that little middle, just the little center of the frame. And we don't want that. We want that to be a lot bigger. So what we're going to do is not change the position, but we're going to change the size. So we're going to stretch this ellipse mask out to maybe 9.2. We're going to stretch this out to maybe 5.3. But we have a problem now, and that is that this ellipse mask does not have a very nice soft edge. We can reduce the factor that we're multiplying it by as much as we want, and we can see, okay, we're getting that edge darkening effect that we want a little bit, but we have this really hard cutoff here, and that's not good. We don't want that. So we have a very simple node called the, you guessed it, blur node that we can just stick right in here, and we can change the size to whatever we want. The higher size, the bigger of the blend it'll have. So I'll start out with, say, like 10, and you'll notice that it softens the edges just a little bit. If I go to maybe 50, now we're getting pretty soft. We can still see where it's being affected pretty visibly, so we want to go up to something more like 300. And now you can barely notice it, and that's what we want. We just want it to be a subtle effect, a subtle darkening of the edges, but something that's still drawing our attention to the center of the frame. So we can turn this factor maybe a little bit more, play around with that. We don't want to darken the edges too much. We just want it to be something simple. But now if we go back and hold down Control Shift and click this one here, you'll see how the edges are not dark at all. We Control Shift, click on Multiply. You can see how those edges are more darkened now, and we have a lot nicer focus on the center of our frame. So vignettes are something that are a very powerful tool, and I'll crank this up to 1 just to show you guys what it's doing at its absolute maximum, but we never want to have any compositing effects on at 100%. We just want to be subtle with it. We want to just add little nice professional touches to our render. Yeah, so the other thing that I'll teach you guys very, very quickly is how to do what we like to call boosh at Squared Media. And what that is basically just a soft glow around the highlights of the scene. And this scene may not be the best example of it because I don't really have many highlights, but I'll still be able to explain the basic concept. So what we want to do is we want to get a color correction node. And we're going to plug that into our image. And we're going to press Control Shift and click on it just to see what this node is doing. And what we want to do when we're making part of our scene glow and make it look more professional is you want to isolate the highlights, which means we need to turn down our shadows and our midtones. So we're going to just turn the gain down to 0 on our shadows and our midtones, and that will highlight all the brightest parts of our scene. This is something that, again, I'll go into more detail with a little bit later, and depending on how you lit your scene, you may not have a good balance of shadows, midtones, and highlights. But just for the sake of this tutorial, fiddle around with it. I'm just going to show you the process once, and we're going to go into more detail on it in the future. So now we want to take these highlights and we want to give them a nice soft glow, almost as if the sun is reflecting off them and it's messing with the camera lens a little bit, but not too much. So what we can do now is we can take our blur node and we can stick that in front of it. I'm just going to connect this from now. We'll stick the blur node in front of it, and we're going to give this a nice soft, maybe 20. We'll go like 50 or 60 for this one. Like just a very nice, soft, like I've said 14 times already, glow to all the highlights. And then what we want to do is we'll bring our vignette function down here. And what we want to do is we want to add this glow to the base image. And this is where the compositor starts to get very complicated, and this is something where I can lose you guys very easily, and I'm aware of that. So this is why this is the last thing I'm going to teach you guys today. But we're going to take another multiply node here, and we're going to take our original image, which comes from just the very first box here. We're going to plug it into A, and then we're going to take the blurry image. So we're taking this original image here, then we're going to blurry image, and then we're going to put that into box B, and then we are going to multiply that. We're going to click on Control Shift, click on multiply so we can see what's happening, and then we are slightly going to turn up the factor. Then we're going to change multiply to screen because we want to add the blur on top of it. Multiplying, we would be multiplying the two results together, and it would basically be starting to subtract color, as you would see if I were to do this. But what we want is to actually add that blur, that nice soft blur on top of what we already have. So we're going to screen it on top of the image. And as you can see, adding anything in excess does not look good. We turn them to something like maybe 0.1. We already get a nice soft glow that before we didn't have. But now you can notice the torch is just a little bit more glowy, that the face is a little bit more glowy, and just having that little bit of glare on it that's being influenced by all the highlights of the scene just makes it look a little bit more professional. So now we want to add the glare as well as the vignette together. So what we want to do is we just want to add the vignette at the very, very end of what we're doing. So since this is the main chain of what we're doing in the image itself, we're going to plug this result into the first layer of the vignette, and then we're going to click on that, and the vignette gets applied at the very, very end. So again, I'll talk more on how the compositor works as far as how your image is being fed through different nodes and how we're doing math to get to the final result that we're after. But just these two very simple systems, one being adding glow to the highlights of your scene where your scene is the brightest, and one adding a vignette, which is darkening of the edges of your screen to focus in on the middle of the scene. Just with those two things, you're already looking a whole lot more professional than just your base image, as you can see as I swap between here. Alright, and that's going to do it for this tutorial, this short little 1.5, which ended up still being 20-something minutes. So lots of good stuff. Hope you guys learned something. Make sure to join the Discord and post your guys' results as you're working on renders, especially as you're looking to get help and you're running into problems. I'm really proud of you guys for keeping that a safe place and a place for learning. You guys have all been very respectful with your questions. You've been asking some great questions. And it's been really exciting to see almost 400 of you join after the first video. So that's been really encouraging. But yeah, hope to see you guys there. I'll be coming out with the next video on January 11th. That one's going to be a little more long, a little more formal. This one was a lot more unscripted, not in the suit, just in a polo. So as you can see, a little more casual of a video, but we'll be back in full on January 11th. So looking forward to seeing you guys then, and happy learning.